Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping right in, headfirst really, into a specific and, well, incredibly difficult account for the Book of Judges.
That's right. We're focusing entirely on chapter 19.
Just that one chapter. Our aim is to unpack what this single narrative presents, no matter how stark it gets.
And it gets very stark, very quickly. It's a text that immediately confronts you, really. It sets the stage with a phrase that echoes through Judges.
Yeah, that very first line. In those days, Israel had no king. It pops up at key moments, doesn't it?
It does. It's almost like a refrain or a framing device.
Suggesting, well, the text seems to suggest a time without central authority,
Right.
leading to, well, chaos.
Precisely. The narrative seems to frame this period as one where, people and tribes acted pretty independently. And this story feels like it's being presented as a really disturbing example of what happens when things break down.
When society's norms just aren't holding.
Exactly. Justice structures, basic hospitality. It all seems fragile here.
Okay, so let's get into the story itself. It starts with a Levite, someone from the priestly tribe, right?
Yes, living up in the hill country of Ephraim, a remote area.
And he has a concubine, a term that, well, it meant something like a secondary wife or partner back then.
Mm-hmm. And she was from Bethlehem, down in Judah.
Okay, and the initial problem. The text says she was unfaithful, or maybe she was angry and just left him off it in the ground. The Hebrew's a bit ambiguous there, I think.
It can be read a couple of ways, yes. But the result is she goes back to her father's house in Bethlehem.
And she stays there. For 4 months, the text says.
4 months. Then the Levite decides, okay, he needs to go get her.
The source says he went to speak kindly to her and bring her back. Seems reasonable enough.
Yeah, he takes his servant and 2 donkeys for the trip. A small party.
So he travels south to Bethlehem. And how's the reception when he gets there?
Surprisingly positive, actually. The text makes a point of saying her father, his father-in-law, welcomed him gladly.
Gladly. Okay, so maybe things are looking up. Potential
Yeah.
reconciliation.
You'd think so. And the welcome is, well, it's intense. Almost over the top.
How so?
The text emphasizes that the father-in-law prevailed upon him to stay, not just for a bit, but for 3 whole days, eating, drinking, spending time together.
3 days. That's quite a welcome.
And it doesn't stop. On day 4, the Levite gets up to leave in the morning,
Ready to go home.
but the father-in-law insists, refresh yourself, then you can go. Makes him stay for food, and then persuades him to stay the night again.
Wow. It's like he can't let him leave. Almost like Groundhog Day, you said.
It really feels like that. And it happens again on the 5th day. Refresh yourself, wait till afternoon, more eating, more drinking. It's late afternoon before the Levite finally puts his foot down.
He finally gets himself, his concubine, the servant, the donkeys, all ready to go.
Even then, the father-in-law tries one last time. Look, the day's almost over. Just stay one more night.
It's strange, isn't it? Such prolonged, almost forceful hospitality.
It is. But the Levite finally resists that last plea. They set out late on the 5th day.
Heading north, back towards Ephraim, which means they need to pass near Jebus.
Old name for Jerusalem, yeah.
And that delay in leaving, it becomes critical.
Absolutely critical, because by the time they're getting close to Jebus, the sun is setting. It's getting dark.
And the servant speaks up. He says, basically, hey, let's stop here in Jebus, spend the night with the Jebusites. It seems practical.
Very practical. But the master, the Levite, he refuses point blank.
And this is a major turning point in the story, isn't it?
It really is. He says he won't go into an alien city whose people are not Israelites.
So even though it's dark, dangerous maybe, he wants to push on to find an Israelite town.
Right. He'd rather risk traveling further in the fading light to reach Gibeah or Ramah, which are in the territory of Benjamin, Israelite territory.
A place he considers his own.
Exactly. Safety among his own people, that's the idea.
So they press on towards Gibeah. And the text says the sun actually set just as they were nearing it.
Talk about bad timing. They arrive right at dusk, exhausted, in the city square of Gibeah.
The public square.
Yeah.
Usually the place a traveler might wait for someone to offer hospitality, right?
Traditionally, yes. But here, nothing. The text states it very clearly. No one took them into his home for the night.
Wow. What a contrast to Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
Just left there in the open square. A Levite, his concubine, his servant, in an Israelite city.
It's jarring and deeply unsettling. They're completely vulnerable.
But then someone does appear. An old man.
Yeah, an old man coming in from working in the fields in the evening.
And the text makes a point of mentioning something interesting about him, too.
It does. It says he was also from the hill country of Ephraim, just like the Levite.
So a fellow Ephraimite living there in Gibeah, which was Benjaminite territory, like a resident alien himself.
Right. He sees these travelers in the square, asks where they're from, where they're going.
The Levite explains came from Bethlehem, heading home towards the house of the Lord, maybe Shiloh or some sanctuary. He even says, look, we have our own food and straw. We don't need provisions.
We just need a place to spend the night.
And the old man, seeing their situation, steps up. He offers his own home.
He says, you are welcome at my house. Don't spend the night in the square. A crucial offer of hospitality.
Finally. So they go with him, they get the donkey settled, fed, they wash their feet, a standard custom, and they start to eat and drink. Some relief, some safety at last.
The text says they were inside, enjoying themselves, finding a moment of comfort after that long, difficult day and their rejection in the square.
But that moment of peace, it doesn't last long at all.
No, it's shattered. Brutally. The text says, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house.
Just like that, surrounded the house, started pounding on the door.
Violently.
And they shout to the old man inside, making a demand that is just unthinkable.
Yeah. They demand he bring out the visitor, the Levite, so they can have sex with him.
It's presented as this profound violation, an attack on the guest, an attack on the host's duty to protect his guest. It breaks every conceivable rule of hospitality and basic decency for that culture. The old man, the host, he goes outside. He actually tries to reason with them, calls them friends, pleads with them.
Begs them not to do such a vile thing, such a disgraceful thing against his guest. He stresses, he's under my roof.
And then comes perhaps the most shocking part of this whole negotiation, if you can even call it that, the old man's counteroffer.
It's deeply disturbing. It reveals a horrifying hierarchy of values in that desperate moment, at least as the text portrays it.
He offers the mob his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead of the male guest.
He says they can use them and do to them whatever you wish. His words, according to the text, just don't do this disgraceful thing to the man.
It's hard to even process that, offering women as shields, essentially.
The text is unflinching in reporting it. But the mob, these wicked men, they refuse. They won't listen to the old man.
They want the man.
They want the man. And then the focus shifts. The narrative states quite starkly. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them.
The Levite, the guest, he sends her out.
Yes, that's what the text says he did. He takes the initiative described here.
And what happens next is described with brutal brevity.
Horrifically brief. The source says the men raped and abused her throughout the night, all night long, finally letting her go only at dawn.
Just an unimaginable horror inflicted on someone who should have been protected by both the host and the Levite.
Absolutely. The breakdown is complete.
So the morning comes, dawn breaks, and the text describes the woman. She makes it back to the house.
She manages to get back, collapses at the door, and lies there. Her hands are on the threshold. She lies there until it's fully light.
And the master, the Levite, he gets up in the morning, ready to continue his journey. He opens the door.
And finds her, lying right there in the doorway.
His words to her are recorded too. He says, "Get up, let's go."
Just like that.
But there was no answer. Chilling. Just silence.
The implication is clear. She's dead or unresponsive. He then puts her body onto his donkey.
And just leaves. The text doesn't describe any immediate grief or outrage from him at that moment.
Not right then, no. As the narrative presents it, he puts her on the donkey and sets out for home. The emotional reaction, or rather the action it leads to, comes later.
Right. And that action it takes the horror to another level entirely when he gets back to his house in Ephraim.
He takes a knife, and the text says he cut up his concubine's body, limb by limb, into 12 parts.
It's almost impossible to comprehend. Just gruesome beyond words.
And the text makes it clear this wasn't just, a blind act of rage or grief. It was deliberate, calculated. There was a purpose.
A purpose? What purpose could there possibly be?
He sent these 12 parts out into all the areas of Israel, one part for each of the traditional tribal areas.
Oh, God. That's a message nobody could ignore. A horrifying, visceral message.
Exactly. It bypasses words. It's a physical, undeniable report of the atrocity committed in Gibeah sent to the entire nation. A demand for attention, for action.
And how did Israel react? What does the source say?
The reaction was apparently universal horror and shock. Everyone who saw it said, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt.
Since leaving Egypt. That's framing it as an unprecedented low point in their history.
A moment of absolute crisis. And the chapter ends not just with that reaction, but with the people challenging each other. And maybe challenging the reader, too.
What do they say?
They urge each other. Think about it. Consider it. Tell us what to do.
Tell us what to do. Wow. Okay, so let's step back and try to connect these pieces based on what the text gives us. We started with, in those days, Israel had no king. How does this awful story illustrate the consequences of that, according to Judges?
Well, the text strongly implies this story is the illustration. The lack of a king, as the writer seems to see it, leads directly to this kind of social and moral collapse.
Right, like in Gibeah, an Israelite city, where basic hospitality fails completely, a traveler is ignored, left vulnerable.
And then subjected to this horrific mob violence, with the host ultimately unable to protect his guests and the guests taking that awful action. It shows a breakdown of communal responsibility, of justice, of order, things a king might ideally provide or at least symbolize.
That contrast in hospitality you mentioned earlier is huge too, isn't it? Between Bethlehem and Gibeah.
It's incredibly stark. You have the father-in-law's excessive, almost suffocating welcome in Judah. Maybe it was genuine, maybe manipulative, who knows, but it was there.
And then the complete opposite in Gibeah of Benjamin. First, total indifference, then this monstrous violation of the guest-host bond. The text really uses that contrast, doesn't it?
It hammers it home, highlighting the difference between these places, maybe suggesting a deeper moral decay setting in, particularly in Benjamin, as the next chapters show.
And within that violation in Gibeah, the actions of the old man and the Levite offering the women, a text just lays it out there. What does that tell us, according to the source?
It's presented as part of the horror, not as something acceptable. It raises really difficult questions about the value placed on women in that desperate situation, as depicted. The old man offers his daughter. The Levite sends his concubine out.
They become pawns. Sacrifices offered to appease male violence. It shows a complete failure of protection.
A collision of desperation and just, twisted values, as the text presents it.
And the violence itself, the gang rape, the dismemberment. It's so extreme. Why include such graphic detail? What about the purpose of cutting up the body?
The extremity seems intentional in the narrative. It underscores the depth of the depravity in Gibeah. And the dismemberment, as we discussed, it's portrayed as this shocking, undeniable call to arms.
Not just mourning, but a message. A gruesome PR campaign, almost.
In a way, yes. A visceral report demanding national attention. It forced every tribe to confront what happened, making it impossible to ignore. The text frames it as the catalyst that finally united the other tribes in outrage against Benjamin.
It transforms a local atrocity into a national crisis, stemming, the text suggests, from that lack of kingship, that lack of order.
That seems to be the narrative logic, yes. The moral vacuum leads to the horror leads to this extreme act, and that act forces a national response.
Which brings us back to those final words. Think about it, consider it, tell us what to do. It really feels like the text is throwing that question out beyond the characters in the story.
It absolutely does. It feels directed at anyone who encounters this story, even now. It demands reflection. It demands you grapple with the implications.
So this account, preserved so starkly in the source material, it serves as this terrifying case study. A warning, maybe.
It functions as a powerful, unforgettable example of the chaos and moral freefall that the Book of Judges associates with that specific period, the time when Israel had no king.
It forces you, the reader, the listener, to ask, what happens when the structures break down? When basic decency, shared values, protection, when they just evaporate?
The text doesn't give easy answers, but it paints a brutal picture of the potential consequences through this one story.
And it leaves us right there with that command echoing from the text itself. Think about it. Consider it. Tell us what to do. What does this ancient, disturbing story make you consider about society, about justice, about the consequences of moral failure?
That's the challenge, isn't it? The heavy question Judges 19 leaves hanging in the air. It compels you to engage with the darkness and ponder its enduring relevance.